My topic today is entitled Doctrine of Devils. Doctrine of Devils. And what the psalmist was saying here when he said that the wicked are estranged, to be estranged is to be a foreigner, is to be an enemy, is to become profane or a harlot. And Yahuwah is saying that many have been set aside from the very womb. The psalmist David said, he said in Psalm 51 verse 5 that we were all born into sin and shaped into iniquity of sin. So it tells us, behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Right? So if it said to us that the wicked are estranged from the womb, it says here that they are led astray as early from the womb. They err. And I believe Yahuwah is saying that this may be based on the fact of parenting. There are some parents that never had any kind of scriptural foundation. All they have known is wickedness. Wheeling and dealing and conniving here, conniving there to get by. You know, prostituting themselves. And then they come and they have a child. And that child now, from as early as in the womb, the DNA, so to speak, of that child is written, because a child learns from what they see. So Yahuwah knows based on predestination. Many people say predestination is evil, because Yahuwah predestined some to hell, and he predestined some again to go to Shamayim. But the scripture says Yahuwah knows those that are his. He knows those. And because of that, he said that they are the serpent seed. The serpent seed. And the serpent seed are enemy of righteousness. And they are enemy of righteousness simply because of vanity. Vanity. All right? They love vanity. And when we examine the word vanity, vanity based on the Strong Concordance, Hebrew 1891 and 92, we'll see here talk about Habal or Habahal. It talks about to act emptily, right? To become vain, to be filled with vain hopes. Well, basically it carries the connotation of being empty. It talks about vapor. Now, vapor is something that is worthless. It is empty. So here it carries a serious connotation to tell you about the doctrine, this doctrine that many people hold fast to. And that's why we talked about the doctrine of devils. The doctrine of devils, they are vanity. They are vanity. They are worthless. They are empty. They are delusions or delusive. We're looking into other scriptures. Habakkuk 2:18. It says, what profit the graven image that the maker thereof had graven it, the molten image, and a teacher of lies. In the context here, Habakkuk is saying that the graven image, he is calling that graven image a teacher of lies. And many people today have their images, their graven image. And this graven image teaches doctrine of devil, teaches lies. Again, we can look at Ezekiel 20:32. And that which cometh into your mind shall not be at all, that you say, we will be as the heathen, as the families of the country to serve wood and stones. In Matthew 13:41, it says, the Son of Man shall set forth his angels, and they shall gather out of the kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity. And them that do iniquity. So the scripture tells us in Ephesians 4:14, he said that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind and doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. And we must know that when they talk about the word cunning, cunning has both a good and bad connotation, because cunning means to be wise, a wise man, one that is learned, one that is skillful, one that is ethically sound or religiously sound. Whereas in the bad sense, it talks about one that is a deceiver, right? Is one that would invent schemes, interpenetrate, he fabricates in a malicious sense, using deception, trickery, and evil deeds. So that is why scripture says to us that we must not imagine vain things, or that many have been given over to vain imagination, simply because they continue to allow the enemy of righteousness to work in and through them. And what many have not comprehended is that there was nothing as great as that prophecy where Yahuwah said that because of our rebellion and disobedience, I will scatter you throughout the diaspora into the other nations of the earth. He said, and there you will worship wood and stones and these different things. Now, wood and stones speaks about the worship of idols. And based on what Habakkuk said, he said that many would listen to the doctrine of these images, these idols. In Deuteronomy 32:21, they have moved me to jealousy with that which is not Yahuwah. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So here again we are seeing that Yahuwah had prophesied to us that he will send us unto this nation, a nation that knows not Yahuwah, where we would bow down to wood and stones and these different things. And my brothers and sisters, what I'm saying to you today is that many would not like to agree with the fact that in world religion today, Christianity also inclusive, that they actually bow down to idols. They worship the wood and the crucifixion, the crucifix. They worship the image. And Yahuwah had spoken to us at length, telling us that in the last days some would be taken over to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. It went on to talk about every wind of doctrine. Every wind of doctrine refers to those that are compromisers, so to speak. We saw this analogy in Matthew 11:7. He said, as they departed, Yahushua began to say to the multitude concerning John, what went you out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind? Because a reed was an upright plant, very hollow. So as the wind blow, it will go down, it will bend, it have a tendency to bend, go forward or go backward accordingly, and then it will come back upright again. So he used this analogy to ask the people what they went out to see. If they went out to see a reed shaking with the wind. This here is speaking of or referring to a compromiser. And Yahuwah was saying that John was not a compromiser. Even himself, Yahushua Mashiach, when he came and he did not compromise his position. He spoke the Tanakh, he spoke the words, he spoke the words of the covenant, or the covenantal obligations. He echoed these covenantal obligations is that of testimonies, mitzpat, judgment, ordinances, statutes. These are the obligations of the covenant. So when John was speaking and Yahushua was speaking, they spoke boldly. They spoke boldly. They understood that the priest's lips should keep knowledge. Yet many in Yashua, you saw they develop a heart of stone. This heart of stone, metaphorically speaking, it speaks about a perverse heart, a heart of perversity, given over to perversity. And Yahuwah is saying that even in the womb, because he knows our ending from our beginning, he knows those that are his, and he knows those that are given over to a perverse heart. Now, the thing about it is that even though one has a perverse heart, if they are willing and they fear Yahuwah is able to take away that heart of stone and bring them into a covenant relationship with him. But we have seen many generations, they call it a generation curse. The children grew up, saw the behavioral pattern of the elders, the families, and they continue in that trend, right up until they went straight back into the grave. Continuing to do what? Transgress the word of Yahuwah, doing iniquity. In 2 Kings 17:15, and they rejected the statutes. These are the covenantal obligations. They rejected the statutes and his covenant. So you see, when we're talking about covenant, there are obligations to the covenant. So there must be laws, statutes, ordinances, judgments, testimonies, and all of that point to Sabbath keeping and these different things, feast day. These are the obligations. But many people today, they are proclaiming to be in a covenant relationship with no obligations whatsoever. And here he said that the mistake Yashua did is they rejected the statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers and his testimonies, which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain and went after the heathens that were wrong about them, concerning whom Yahuwah had charged them that they should not do like them. So here we are, scattered through the diaspora, and we now embrace the idols of the heathen. And here it was also prophesied. He said, for by the vain splendor of men, the vain boasting of men, they entered into the world, and therefore shall they come shortly to an end. For a father afflicted with untimely mourning, when he had made an image of his child, soon taken away, now honored him as a god, which was then a dead man, and delivered to those that were under him ceremonies and sacrifices. 16. Thus in the process of time, an ungodly custom groweth strong, was kept as a law, and graven images were worshipped by the commandments of kings. In 21, hear what it says. And this was an occasion to deceive the world. So the entire world, the scripture says in Revelation, that the entire world is deceived. And many people today just cannot put their finger to the button to say that, look, this is where the world was deceived. Many had been deceived. The entire nations had been deceived because the Roman Empire or Roman emperors They made an image of their son, stricken with death, and they worship him now as a god. In so doing, they made an image of him, that they put up in their homes, they have it in their vehicles, they have it all over. The image of their white Jesus. They have it with them. And Yahuwah said that this was an occasion to deceive the world. For men serving either calamity or tyranny did ascribe unto stones and stocks. Unto stone and stocks. Now remember, the word said to us that he had prophesied that we would worship wood and stones. Wood here is symbolic of tree, and trees are symbolic of stocks. So stock here is also symbolic of doctrine of vanity. It is symbolic of doctrine of vanity. In Jeremiah 10, it says, but they are altogether brutish and foolish. They are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanity. So here we are seeing, and you will get the gist, that when we talk about wood being given over to wood and stone, stock here speaks of doctrine of vanity. So the doctrine of vanity is doctrines of devil. Why? Because it is the image, the idol that they worship is where they are getting their source and their doctrine from. And Yahuwah is saying it is vain. It is vain. Because vain institutions are the one who teaches lies. They teaches the lies of the image. Remember I shared with you, image in Hebrew is a teraphim. The teraphim has the ability to speak, has the ability to heal, and to deliver and do all manner of things. The teraphim can actually perform miracles. So many of us who continue to run down miracle signs and wonders have not comprehended how many have embraced doctrines of devils, empty words, empty philosophy, simply because they worship the gods that was given to them by the Roman emperor. In Matthew 7:23, I want us to pay attention to the word iniquity. And it says here, and I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that worketh iniquity. Going back to Matthew 13:41, the Son of Man shall send forth his malaks, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them that do iniquity. Sadly, again, many in world religion cannot see that they are doing iniquity. But they do iniquity when they teach lies, when they teach anomia, and when they practice antinomos. And all of that simply speaks about opposing law, violating Yahuwah's law. So they depart from Yahuwah's Torah. They depart from law. Every one of the apostles and those that went before, the scripture says many were sore asunder, many fed to lions, many were persecuted for their faith. And they went to the gallows, the slaughterhouses, wherever, They went willingly, never compromising. They died holding fast to faith. And I want to admonish you that peradventure the time comes that you will be persecuted for the name of Yahuwah and persecuted for righteousness, that you will not compromise, but that you will stand firm in faith, firm believing the things that are written therein. Do not compromise. Don't be like a reed, bending today at every wind of doctrine. 1 minute you're standing upright, the next minute you bend down. When they look at you again, you're upright, then you bend down again. It speaks about a compromising attitude. And we must not compromise our belief. Reeds are symbolic, my brothers and sisters, of weakness. You would see this in Isaiah 42. And we'll read it in the context 1 to 4. In Isaiah 42, he said, behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him, and he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not cry. So this here is speaking about Yahushua HaMashiach. Because to cry, based on the Strong Concordance, is 77-75. They talk about sure. Sure means to cry. So the very name, if it had been prophesied of the Messiah, his name cannot be Yeshua. Because Yeshua, sure means to cry. And the scripture had prophesied that he will not cry. He will not cry. All right, go back to the verse, please. In Isaiah 42. He shall not cry, nor lift up, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed shall he not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench, but he shall bring forth judgment unto truth. And he shall not fail nor be discouraged, till he have set judgment in the earth. And the eyes of the Gentile shall wait for his Torah, for his covenantal obligations. But what they did is that when they rewrote the scripture, the first version was the Septuagint, so that would have been first, and then you had the Latin Vulgate. It is in the Septuagint that they change, or they erroneously labeled law or the covenantal obligations as law or the word. And in so doing, when anytime people see law, they believe it just speaks of the mitzvah, which are the 10 Commandments. But this here speaks about all of the covenantal obligations. Remember we said that many profess to be Abraham's seed. And Father Abraham, he kept the covenantal obligations. We saw this in Genesis 26, 4 and 5, where he kept the covenantal obligations, he says, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So the book cannot lie. If they said Yahuwah, and Yahuwah speaking, he said that I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of the heaven, and I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed. Yahuwah is speaking, and he is saying to Abraham that Abraham obeyed his voice and kept his charge, kept his commandments, his statutes, and his laws. Laws here again, my brothers and sisters, must be in the context of understanding that all of this encompass the covenantal obligations. Because if you have a covenant there must be obligations to that covenant. A covenant cannot be void in itself. So here we see that even as the people observed these covenantal obligations, there were those who were considered weak believers, weak, nominal believers, compromisers, having itchy ears. They run in here, they run in there, they holding fast to what they want to hold on, not holding fast to the entire word. They will pick and choose what they want to believe. And in so doing, when testing comes, there is always a tendency for them to compromise. And the scripture says that this reed is symbolic of weakness and instability of believers. And I draw the example of Yahushua, Mashiach, and John, and many of the apostles and disciples that never compromised their position. Some of them never cried out. But even in the midst of tribulation, in the midst of trial and adversity, they praised Yahuwah. They praised, they didn't cry out, but they praised their way through. Daniel in the lion's den, remember that. And why it is they did not compromise? Because they understood who had given them their doctrine. They understood that they had their father's doctrine. And when you have Yahuwah's doctrine, you will not be weak morally. You will not be weak. But you will be strong. Because the Hasidims of the day, they were radical in faith, you know. They were radical in faith. They died for what they believed in. They died. Even in the midst of adversity, they stood fast. They stood fast. Let us look at the word for iniquity again. Let us examine the word for iniquity. In the Greek, right, we must remember these warnings of this word, where he said that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried away by every wind of doctrine. By every wind of doctrine. To be carried away by every wind of doctrine is to be a compromiser. You have an itchy ear. You hear something sound good. But even though it sounds good, is it scripturally sound? So we cannot just run with anything that we hear. But we must be able to test the word, test the rock. Look at the origin. Look at the origin. Because the wicked, which are estranged from the womb, the scripture says here, they are referred to as charmers, whisperers. Whisperers. And who does that? The serpent. The serpent. All because their ear of their understanding have not been opened. So from early in the womb, their ear was never opened. And they go back to the grave with their ear never been opened to the word of Yahuwah. But for us who have the foundation, who can teach children and allow their ears, their spiritual ears to be open, that they can be receptive of Yahuwah's truth, then they walk in light. they would walk in light. But for those that continue to stop their ear from hearing the word, they will perish in their ignorance. So here it says, the word for law is nomos. It says law through the idea of prescriptive usage, general regulation specifically. It speaks of Moses, including the volume, also of the Basura. So figuratively, it speaks of a principle. And this principle is where it speaks of the covenantal obligations. The covenantal obligations. Because it encompasses both Moses and the Basura. So what you have is the written word and the verbal word that Yahushua Mashiach spoke. Iniquity, let us look at iniquity based on Greek 458 and 459. So iniquity here speaks of anomia. Anomia, illegality, it talks about that is violation of law. Violation of law. So it talks about departure from law, transgression of law, wickedness, and unrighteousness. So if Yahuwah says that he will cause his malaks to come and to gather the people, right? He said he will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity. He went on to say, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I know you not. And they were proclaiming that they cast out devil in his name and they do all sort of miracle in his name. Yet he said, depart from me, you worker of iniquity, I know you not. So iniquity here speaks about lawlessness. In 459, you see the word there, nomos again. All they do is just put an A in front of it to say anomos. It speaks of lawless, not subjected to the Hebrew law. Not subjected to the Hebrew law. So if you are teaching that there is no law, then you are teaching lawlessness. And in so doing, your doctrine are empty. Your doctrine are doctrines of devils. Because you are teaching people to err. You are teaching people to be led astray. It speaks of wicked, without law, without any kind of moral law, moral values whatsoever. Lawless, transgressor, unlawful, and wicked. So that is what iniquity means. But we know that when, for the Yahudims, there must be law. And that is why the scripture warns us that we must love law. And law here was made mention of as nomos. Let's look at 2 Peter. Let us examine 2 Peter 2, 1 and 2. In 2 Peter, Peter here, Kepha, is again warning the believers against the principle or the concept of anomia, of lawlessness. He said, but there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among the Hebrews. Even in our walk, there are false teachers. So we have to be very careful. Who privately or privately shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying Yahuwah that bought them. For you were bought with a price. You are not your own. And bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious or lascivious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. Yes, because this is what Doctrine of Devils do. They speak against Yahuwah's truth. 2 Timothy 4:14, he said, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil, but Yahuwah rewarded him according to his works. Of whom be thou, we are also, for he had greatly withstood our words. Right? Because here it is that men will continue to reject Yahuwah's words, even as we speak his words to them. Many will do us much evil. It said that. Alexander was one. He did much evil. And here Timothy is saying, he was praying that Yahuwah reward him according to his works. Right? Because he greatly withstood our works. Hebrew 8:4-5:2. It says Torah, custom, manner, mode, law. So when we talk Torah, you are speaking about customs, the customs of the people, the culture of the people, right? You're talking about their manner of living. So it must encompass that of commandments, ordinances, statutes, judgments, testimonies, and all these different things. So here it says to us clearly that because they had erroneously translated the word nomos to say law instead of saying covenantal obligation, right? This is where it caused many to believe in just a 10 commandments. So they believe in just the mitzvah, as the 10 commandments, the words. Because they talk law. So when they say law, they narrow it down to just that. But law in its true sense speaks of everything that Yahuwah had given from Mount Sinai right up to the renewed covenant. The written law and the verbal law, which Yahushua Mashiach spoke. So in closing, I close on this note, that many again in Christianity, sad to say, they see the giving of the law on Mount Sinai as legalism, when in reality, the giving of the law on Mount Sinai was not legalism, but it was the will of Yahuwah. This will is seen in Deuteronomy 4:8. It speaks again of covenantal obligations. Oh, and what nation is there so great that had statutes, judgments so righteous as all this law? So you see, the law here again, the word law is used, which I said before you this day. The law here is used, but it is not speaking of just mitzvah. It is speaking here of the covenantal obligations that Moses and Abraham, Father Abraham, observed. Commandments, statutes, ordinances, judgments, testimonies. These are the things that is what cause you to enter into a covenant relationship with the Most High. Not just faith. Because many would say, oh, the just shall live by faith. But faith in itself, the scripture says faith without works is dead. And they refer to it as doctrine of devil. Because faith without works. Faith without works. He says, show me thy faith, and I will show you my faith with my works. So faith without works are dead. All right? So people, I thank you for coming in this evening. Right? And I want you to remember that idols were called devils. Images were called devils. And if the images were called devils, remember Habakkuk's word to us that they are teachers of lies. They are teachers of falsehood. And that is where you get the concept of doctrine of devils. Doctrine of devils is when our colonial masters, son could have died, and they made an image of him and caused the entire world to worship him as a god. That is doctrine of devils. So we ask you to like, share, and subscribe to our messages. Thanks again for tuning in.